So it's all to play for still.
I think so. Do you want to bet against us?
Hello, Aston Villa fans, and welcome to For the Love of Paul McGrath podcast. And today I'm delighted to be joined to chat about Andres Garcia. I'm joined by Jordi from the Spanish Segunda show. He does a bit on that as well, but he also has his own Substack called La Liga and Beyond. And I can't think of anyone else that I would like to talk to about this, because it's funny, Jordi, when I posted about Andres Garcia about 3 or 4 days ago, you were in the comments underneath afterwards and I went, this guy, yes, I better get chatting to this guy because he seems to know him inside out. So thank you so much, Jordi, for joining us today.
That's a pleasure to be on. Thank you for inviting me.
Excellent. So Aston Villa have signed, it was kind of out of left field, that we signed this right back. Obviously, Villa have a decent knowledge, or I would imagine they're probably a better than most knowledge of Spanish football, having Unai Emery and Monchi and that Spanish connection there. But coming from the Spanish second division, not having played in La Liga, but having this hype and this pomp and this excitement about him. Tell us a small bit about Andres Garcia. When did he first come on your radar, and what do you associate with him?
So last season was sort of his breakthrough season until he had a bit of a bad injury that ruled him out for 3 months. But this season, really, he's kicked on and he's been able to stay fit. So I know that a lot of people have been sharing some of the goals that he's been scoring over the recent weeks. And yeah, he's sort of, as Levante have progressed a lot more this season and played a lot better football than what they did last year, he's gotten a lot more people's radar who watch Spanish football regularly, like myself.
And one of the big things you mentioned there, he was out for 3 months. I read that before doing this podcast. But and for everybody who listens to the podcast and know that I've been ill recently, my head is like a sieve. I can't remember why he was out. What was it again? Was it I can't remember. It was like a bone enema or something like that.
Yeah, so it was Spain are always
a weirdish injury. So it wasn't something that caused concern that could reoccur in the future. That's why I wanted to bring it up, because 3 months is a long time to be out.
Yeah, no, I don't think it's anything to be concerned about. Spain are very detailed, or Spanish clubs are very detailed whenever there's an injury, and they go into a lot of detail, which I think when you read like an English club's press release about an injury, it can always be a bit more vague. But yeah, I wouldn't say it'd be anything to worry about. He's played almost every minute. I think he's only not started once this season, so you can see that he's really in a good condition and he's been on the top of his game from what I've seen of him this season.
So talk to me a bit about Levante. Like 7 million euros with potentially 2 million add-ons for a second division club in Spain. I'd imagine that that's a nice boon to their finances. They don't do an awful lot of business. If I'm not mistaken, I think this guy is their 4th highest ever sale from a monetary point of view. Talk to me about Levante, I suppose, the club itself, where they find themselves, because they have been a bit yo-yo-ish, La Liga, not La Liga, and so on. Where do they kind of stand in the Spanish pyramid?
So I think Levante they're a well-supported club, and they come from obviously a big city in Valencia, which is the second biggest city. But obviously they do sort of have the shadow of Valencia cast over them, because everyone across Europe knows them. But yeah, over the last decade or so, Levante have probably had their best time. They had Paco Lopez as manager, and they got to the Copa del Rey semi-finals, and they were one of the most entertaining sides. And then, unfortunately, just after COVID, they were relegated, which has impacted their finances. So a lot of the troubles that they're having now in this sale is part of that. Their wage structure is quite tight. They're on a real low budget in terms of the salary control that they get given from La Liga. So this sale will be massive for them, even though it seems a pittance for a Premier League club in terms of the 7 million. Obviously, if Levante could choose, they would never have sold him because he was so important to them and he's had such a great season. But they are in a bit of trouble. There was some trouble at the start of last season where people were really worried about the club, and that seemed to sort of quieten down But every year that they're out of La Liga, their finances just get worse and worse, and the parachute payments are there, but they're not the same as what they would be for a championship club. So if you ever go onto the La Liga website and check, you can see just how rapidly their budget has declined over the 3 years that they've not been able to make it back.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, as I say, even historically, they weren't massive sellers in the transfer. I think Keylor Navas was one of their highest sales, and there was somebody else on there that was of note that I can't quite remember. But yeah, they don't I'm not saying they don't produce £20 million players, but they seem like a club who needs to sell them before they get to that price. And the reason I asked that is because, obviously, coming from the Spanish second division here, what's the thought about this guy, Andres Garcia, in Spanish football? Like, my feeling on this is Aston Villa have spotted an opportunity. They've been opportunistic in this one. They've gotten a jump on people. He's tentatively linked with teams in La Liga, and Villa have kind of jumped in there and got this done. Talk to me about how he's perceived, I suppose, within Spain. Is he seen as an up-and-coming star? Because he's not really played much for Spanish underage teams previously, and he seems to be somebody who's figured out how to play the game of football in the last 24 months or so.
Yeah, and I think that probably the reason why he probably hasn't played at the youth levels of Spain is just because of the depth of talent that Spain's able to produce. I mean, Monchi is so highly regarded in Spain. He's still seen as, one of the best sporting directors in the world. I know some people felt his reputation suffered at Roma and some of the end days of what happened at Sevilla in his second spell, but he's still really highly rated. So for him to have obviously spotted him, and it seemed that the only other club with a serious interest from what the Spanish media are saying was Sporting Lisbon. But yeah, I think he's got a real good sort of reputation. His character is something that's spoken about quite a lot, especially in press today. There was, sometimes you see, you can judge a player sometimes by how their social media replies are to him, and there was nothing but sort of praise for him and just wishing him the best and hoping he could come back. His farewell, which is a common thing that happens in Spain that again we don't always see in England, was really emotional. He was in tears on the pitch. And I think it just shows a lot about his character as well, that the people he was thanking were even caretaker managers who gave him some game time at the end of last season. He was thanking Javi Calleja, who was the manager who really sort of blooded him into the first team. And of course, Julian Calero, who is his current manager and who I think has brought him on a lot because he's very good at the defensive side of the game. He does remind me, Calero, of a lot of how Unai Emery is in terms of he's quite pragmatic. He adapts to the opponents and he also adapts to his players. So he's one of the sort of highly rated managers in Spain based on what he's been doing in Segunda over the last 3 or 4 years. So yeah, I think you've got a real good character, and I don't think he's at the place right now to be a first choice, but he'll be good for the group that he's going to go into.
Excellent. Yeah, and that's something that Unai Emery has. I won't say he's outwardly prioritized it, but you can tend to see that he wants to bring in people who are, because he's got this professorial kind of aura about him. He's in the details. He likes to spend lots and lots of time, explaining to people, teaching people, coaching people, proper coach Unai Emery. And he wants to have people in there who, number one, have the capacity to take on learning, and number two, have displayed it in the past to be able to do that and are genuinely good mannered and good and show an aptitude for that kind of things. I suppose we could go down through the likes of Amadou Onana, speaks 7 languages fluently, and would be kind of studious in that aspect as well. Tyrone Mings, so on. So he likes those types of players. So that's interesting to see. That's nice to hear as well, because a lot of times as fans we kind of go, yeah, this guy's got good stats and he's a good footballer. And there's no context or conversation given towards, well, what does he fit in towards? How does he fit in towards the team dynamism? Is he going to come in there and completely turn the dressing room upside down? And I know this guy's only 21 years of age. Very rare that something like that would happen, but it happens an awful lot that you hear in kiss and tell stories and books afterwards, that this guy comes into the dressing room and completely poisons the place. So obviously to hear of good nature from a 21-year-old isn't surprising, but it's really good to hear that level of detail and scouting and due diligence is being done on players, even when they're coming in from a second division team in Spain to come into the club. And I think that's been done overall. And you mentioned that his manager at Levante was kind of the same way as the same style as Unai Emery. Can you tell me, I suppose, what are Andres Garcia's key strengths and maybe a key weakness that you may have come across with him since you've been watching him?
Yeah, so I think in terms of his key strengths, he actually started out as a right winger, and you can sort of see with some of the clips that are going around on social media, like his attacking traits that he had. And I think the good thing is that he's had a sort of good base in that Calleja and Calera are both sort of more pragmatic coaches. So he's sort of had to learn that side of the game. I would say in terms of weaknesses, and it's quite common with Spanish players who first move over, is the physicality of the Premier League. So I think like a good example of that is like Alex Moreno. He sort of reminds me a bit like that, where he's good and, you can see real good things from him when he's on the ball and going forward. But at times you can see him exposed physically, and strikers can sort of play off him. I guess that would be my sort of concern for Andres Garcia moving in, would be how does he adapt physically to what will be a more demanding league than Segunda, where it is a bit more technical and a bit more on the ground.
I call it the La Liga tax. No matter when a defender comes in, because we've obviously Diego Carlos looks like he's on the way out of the club. We've had Diego Carlos for the last 3 years. Big, strong man, looks like he's a cruiserweight boxer. Like we'd all want his building body. But he hasn't really shown, like, if you want to call it, if you want to use a basketball parlance, but when he's under the boards and the ball is dropping in on top of his head, there is an art to using your body and to using your strength like that. And sometimes Carlos did display it, and so he was inconsistent with regards to the times. Got better as his time in England came on. So if you were to apply that across the board, I remember when we signed Alex Moreno from Betis, that was one of the things you could see. He was physically meeker than a lot of other players on the team, but Unai was able to get around that because he was in the full-back's position a bit easier, I think, and he was there, right, don't put yourself in a place to get into a physical altercation with a winger or have a striker pull off the back post onto you. Communication. I think that worked with Moreno, and even since he's gone to Forest, he's displayed those tactics as well. So hopefully we'll be able to do the same with this guy as well in that right back position.
And he's young enough to adapt, isn't he, at 21, to be able to learn that side of the game, and he's got the perfect head coach and assistant to do that for him, hopefully.
Yeah, and he's touching 6'1" as well. So, there is an argument to be made, and I'm, once again, you've seen a lot more from than I have. So I suppose this is a question more so than anything else, because he's only hit the kind of the lights in the last 18 months. I suppose if you take out that 3-month period, he's probably still getting used to playing the role, number one, and secondly, kind of even getting used to his frame at that position. Because if you're playing right wing and you're 6'1", you're not really getting into kind of tussles with people at corners. You're marking space, you're blocking runs and stuff like that. But now he's going to be tasked at coming off a post maybe, and actually, keeping a player out from the goalkeeper and so on. So is that something that the players need to go through, that kind of transition in Spain as well? Because you did mention it's more technical, because he does look like, I've seen a lot of his footage on Y-Scout, and he looks like he's very adept at tackling dribblers, which you like to see from the Spanish game, and obviously translates to the English game. But I didn't see an awful lot of footage of him, in those actual, getting dribbled past and blown past on that right wing. Is that something you think he still needs to adapt to as well, or is it really just the kind of the physicality at corners or at set pieces or whatever?
Yeah, it's a hard one to answer, because I think a lot of the clubs in Spain, they don't, especially in Segunda, where funds are a lot tighter, they don't have those type of explosive wingers that you see in the Premier League. So it'd be interesting to see how he adapts to those, real runners, because it is a lot more intricate, it's a lot more inside in Spanish football. So it will be interesting. I mean, there is teams, Malaga have some really good wingers. There is teams in the league who do have good wingers, and he will have had some exposure to it. But I think the Premier League is just that next level, isn't it, in terms of the quality and the way that they play on the wings, a lot of sides, even like the Forest with Hudson-Odoi and stuff like that. It's going to be really interesting for him how he adapts to that.
Yeah, I agree. I watched 3 of his games. I watched one game against Albacete recently. I watched another game against Cordoba where he had he was, I won't say he had a stinker, but he gave away a penalty and he was like they threw the kitchen sink at him in that game, and I think he was kind of caught out at times. You could see a small bit of rawness from him. But then I watched his game against Tenerife and they won 3-0 as well. And like he ended up.
I was going to come on to that game actually. I think
talk to us about that game, because people will think that I'm just being Mr. Optimistic, glass half full all the time when I speak about this guy. So I'd like them to hear what your opinion was maybe on that game.
Yeah, I might be one of those people to have to deliver that message for you. I think Tenerife are the most dysfunctional team in the division alongside Cartagena right now. So that match was the first match for their third head coach of the season, which says a lot about how their season's gone. So they were particularly bad that day, and once the first sort of goal went in, the floodlights really sort of opened up, and he did have a field day. And I think that goal, you can sort of see the winger essentially pulls his hamstring and gives up for his goal. And there was wide open space where I think they were almost just trying to get some sort of goal to give the crowd something. So I would probably take out that game, because you're not going to learn a lot about him against that Tenerife side, as they were obviously adapting to their new head coach, and they've been so bad this season that that you've got to sort of disconsider that game. But some of the other games where he got a goal, he scored against Huesca and he scored against Mirandés, who are both sides that are in the top 6 fight with Levante, which that's got to be sort of encouraging. And he also got an assist against Burgos and Malaga. And while Burgos are struggling, Malaga defensively have been really good this season. And for them to score 4 in terms of Levante, that shows you how good they were that day. And he was like a key part to that. There's definitely a lot of things to be encouraged about. But he's not the final product. And I personally think it will take time for him to adapt and get into the first team.
I think that's fair enough, because I also watched him play against Cadiz as well, who obviously got relegated from La Liga last year and haven't been having a great time of it since they got relegated. But I thought he was like the Cadiz and the Albacete games were, and look, both of those are at the bottom part of the table as well. I think they're just above the relegation zone. But he looked really solid against those guys, in an attacking and a defensive point of view. So,
and Albacete have some good attackers as well. So I think that's like a good thing. That's something to be encouraged by. That obviously they kept a clean sheet that day. But Cadiz have been quite dysfunctional as well. But there's definitely lots to like about him. If I was a Villa fan, I'd be really pleased, and I'd definitely be happy with the value in terms of the transfer fee.
Excellent, because I think that's exactly what Villa fans are looking at the moment. Villa have had a bit of a, they've in January specifically, we've tended to sign younger players that we wanted to give maybe the 6 months of the rest of the season to acclimatise to English football, acclimatise to Unai Emery's ways, and acclimatise, I suppose, just to, being away from. In the main, being away from the club they've been with all their life. We signed Kostan Jelkovic, who's in the same position here as Andres Garcia. Last January, he obviously went back to Red Star and had an injury and didn't play that much. Looks like we're signing Yashin Özkan as well from Kasımpaşa from Turkey. So the funnel of future proofing is there, and I think that's what, like, a lot of Villa fans would understand. This guy ain't going to come in and get a start on at the weekend against West Ham and just usurp Matty Cash. This guy's going to be in here to learn under, and look, if he's needed. Same with Moreno. I would argue the same that when Moreno was signed in January of 2023 as well. When he came in, we signed him. We didn't expect to use him. Luke Dean gets injured, and in the first game, I think 20 minutes into it, Moreno comes on against Leeds and plays really well, and then just keeps the position in the main for the rest of the season. So he'll be used if he's needed to, but I think there is this softly approach, I would imagine, with him as well, which is good, which is what I think Villa fans really deep down want to see, that type of progression from the player as well.
Yeah, and that's something that Monchi has always done really well, is future proofing and signing that next one or two players in that position to come in and make an impact over like a matter of time and bed them in rather than just throw them straight in. I think that's something where he works really well, and obviously Emery seems to like that way of working as well, which is good.
If last question for you, if I was to ask you to liken him to a fullback that's in the Spanish league or even in the Premier League in world football at the moment, are you going to say Dani Alves to keep the whole Monchi connection going again? Can you please say Dani Alves so we can all get excited?
I wouldn't want to put that pressure on him to call him the next Dani Alves. That's a really good question. I guess he sort of reminds me of, to sort of stick on a Forest theme, he sort of reminds me of Nico Williams, the Welsh fullback. He's got some real good attacking traits. He's a hard worker and seems a really good character that people like and want in the group. So yeah, I would say he's sort of similar to Nico Williams, who's also having a fantastic season for Forest. So yeah,
spoken like a true Welshman there, Jordan. Spoken like a true Welshman,
Yeah. He's not from too far from me either, so I had to give him a mention there, didn't I?
Nice, excellent. Well, look, if he can replicate it, if this guy can come in and replicate what any Forest player has been doing over the course of the season, well, then he's going to be a massive shot in the arm for us, specifically in the attacking side of things. And that's where this guy's going to bring things in the main. I think he's carrying ability, his attacking ability, while also being stout in defence and capable in defence as well. So thank you so much for your insight today, Jordan. I really, really appreciate it. Do you want to tell everyone where they can find you? Obviously on Substack at La Liga and beyond. But where else can everyone find you? Because it's funny, like we do an awful lot of scouting in this, and there's a amount of people who come to me and go, where can I, read from people who look at this league? Where can I read from people who look at that league? And, it seems to be infectious, wanting to understand about other leagues. So
yeah, of course.
The floor is yours.
Yep. So obviously I do some content for the Spanish Segunda show, and then you've also got the podcast of that, which is something that Alex and Liam host and is going from strength to strength. And yeah, you mentioned the Substack. So the Substack is called La Liga and Beyond, and we look at all tiers of Spanish football and we try to do something different each week, really. So this week was all about Real Balompedicha Linense, which is like a fourth tier club, and the experience of going to that. But then we also do things, we've looked at players like top 5 players to look out for in Spanish Segunda, where players like Jeremy, who are linked to Chelsea at the minute, we do all sorts. So yeah, I think they're the main ones. And obviously on Twitter, it's at JordyT1992.
Excellent. You've got I've got a funny feeling we'll have a couple of people logging on to that Substack and getting more knowledgeable about Spanish football.
Please subscribe if you do, and let me know your thoughts. So thank you.
Excellent. And you know what? I might be coming back to you looking for more information if this Like Bade deal goes through as well, because I have a lot to say on Like Bade as well. So we may be speaking to you in the very near future as well if you're available, Charlie. That'd be absolutely great. But thanks a million for your time. I really, really appreciate it. You've been a mine of information. It's always good to not stick within my own echo chamber. Sometimes when I watch a player, I get very convinced of a player, and sometimes you don't see maybe some of the wrinkles and so on. So it's always great to talk to people like yourselves who have this clearer view, this more sober view of a player, and come on and confirm some of the good things I've seen about him, and maybe highlight some of the things that maybe I might have overlooked as well. So thank you so much. I really appreciate your time.
Oh, thanks a lot. Thanks for having me. Bye.
Excellent. Thanks so much to everybody for watching and for listening. As always, we will be back as soon as there's any more news. In the meantime, everyone stay safe, stay healthy, and all that's left to say is up the Villa.